Was that like a deliberate strategy that you understood, or was that just something that evolved out of?
It was a fairly...
How did you, because in this way, I mean, like I've seen you talk about DataOps, and then someone said IBM did it, and I retweeted something, in LinkedIn, like, hey man, this is way, I've heard this from Lale many years earlier, guys. Come on.
So
how did you get up to this?
Well, the concept didn't exist. I think the term was invented in 2014, and this was 2013. But that is what best describes what we did. It was a fairly low-level decision, if I remember correctly, and we were just being swamped with requests from other teams to do things for them. And it's a natural progress for an organization to have these experts, consultant data teams in the beginning, but then sort of try to democratize later. So we felt that, we just enable everybody else instead.
So it becomes a data serve model. Is that a way of putting it?
Yeah, not data serve, but sort of self-service for development teams to build pipelines and to do so without coordinating with the central team, sort of central data teams. So it was an evolution of the data platform.
A survival, as it sounds at this point.
Something like that. We were being swamped. Anyway, I should go further because I just want to mention that because that has been my mission in life since, like enable people to get value from data.
Good mission.
I moved on to Schibsted. A former manager at Google contacted me and said, we're going to build a central tech organization with a central data platform. Do you want to come here and like architect the data platform for us? And Schibsted is not so well known in tech in the tech world, but there were, like, all in all, with all the clones of Blocket and all of the newspapers that they own and so forth, there were like 200 million users who were generating data. So that seemed like an interesting endeavor, right? And it was a way to sort of I reckon it had like a 10% chance of creating a Scandinavian internet giant. And if I got the chance to be in early on that, I wanted that chance. And we succeeded extremely well in recruiting really good tech people. But nevertheless, we were not set up for success. So it has, they have picked apart this organization after that. There were lots of interesting tech were being done, and it was a very educational journey, but eventually collapsed under its own size in a sense.
This is another very interesting discussion about centralized versus decentralized
and organized and all that. So let's also park that in our head. we will have 3 hours today, Anders. I think.
Exactly.
So I moved after a while. I met some really good people there and learned a lot from doing things with the greenfield. But I went on to become an independent consultant and. With the mission to help organizations get more value from data. And I've had a wide range of clients, some weird startups, some AI and other things. I've been back at Spotify a couple of times doing consulting, which is interesting because what you planted a couple of years ago, you can now see how it has evolved and so forth. So that has been very educational. And I've been at a number of banks. I spent a significant time at SEB, for example, when they were doing a sort of a big data project. And my last and most successful engagement was at Bonnier News, so Dagens Nyheter, Expressen, Dagens Industri, half of the major Swedish newspapers, the half that's not Schibsted. And that was interesting because by then I had realized that many of these big data efforts are like suffering from way too much complexity. There are all of these piles of technology toppling over each other. So I had the trust of the CTO. And the sort of the lead architect at the company who was our champion, and I got the opportunity to build a platform there for data processing by scaling everything out that was not necessary. So we did the simplest possible thing, but implemented the sort of the important workflows and the democratization of data and getting things working and so forth. And when you see these sort of big Hadoop project or big data efforts on the large companies, it takes 6-9 months up to 2-3 years to get them into production. Like from the day that I walked in, had a hand, like 3-4 people to work with, to the moment that we had a pipeline in production and a client, an internal customer who we had to find first, that said, yes, this saves a lot of my time. This is very valuable. That was 3 weeks. Right? Mm-hmm. And then that is the shortest I've ever seen from nothing into production.
But I know we have talked about this before, and we can also come here, but this is one of the key. Simplicity, reduce complexity is one of the key topics. And I think going into even how you measure KPIs, how many pipelines can you put in production per month is a very interesting metric that not very many people do.
Yes, I can rant about this for a while.
Let's get there later. Yeah,
but let's go there later. Yes,
because now we are sort of getting here, and now I guess we are soon arriving at Scling.
Exactly. So after this, I'd hooked up with an old colleague from Schibsted, and we said let's do a startup. And to some degree, this was a reaction on I have so limited power to actually enable these companies because they are hindered by their own ways of working, their culture and their organizations and so forth. I think we can have more impact if we do something externally. And during my freelancing, I had contact with a number of large Scandinavian corporations, either direct or indirect, hearing from others who were there, many of them in the Wallenberg family. So I heard directly or indirectly from like Atlas Copco and Electrolux and SKF and Husqvarna and so forth, right? And the impression that we got was that they want to buy big data, right? Nowadays they want to buy AI, get a box, unpack it, put it in a rack, turn on the power, get a service agreement, and so forth. And now we have AI or we have big data, and that makes we can laugh at it, right? But it makes perfect sense. It's not their core business, right? So it's not so easy to just flip the company over and become data driven or AI driven. Why can't it be a commodity, just like power or electrical power or commuting or computing nowadays?
I think it will be at some point in the future, like big data or AI or HPC.
To some degree, lots of exotic computing things that we used to think were weird, like internet and data, so is a commodity today, right? Yeah. So it's not a weird thing to think. So we scratched our heads and we said, okay, how can we supply this, right? What I've seen, the ways for the if you're a super technical company, then you're self-sufficient. But for the non-super technical companies, which we have lots of really good companies that I would like out there that I would like to help. For them to tackle these things and get these superpowers of data and AI, like how can they do this? They have it's a fairly short menu today, right? They can hire consultants, which can do customized things for them. But you have in order to hire consultants, you have to know really well what you want, right? And that works in the construction industry because it's so well established. But as a buyer, you are not competent enough to buy the right things. And the incentives are wrong because the consultants really have strong incentives to build very complex things and topple all of these technologies on top of each other so they can
stay forever and make money on the licenses.
Or show off for their next employment or whatever, right? And I don't think that the consultants are bad people in any way, but the incentives are set that way, right? And that changes people's behavior. So,
but it's not only the consultants; it's the whole the vendor licensing models and how you want to get people into the one and same universe. good or bad. There's many dimensions here that the whole industry together, vendor, consultants, recruitment, brokering, it kind of, I think they're all moving in the wrong, together it's actually a bad spiral instead of a good spiral. That's what I hear. And I've been on the same path. Is the industry set up where it should be?
Yeah, that's a good question. That brings us to vendors, which is one of the other options on the menu, right? If particularly if you have a relation with like IBM, Informatica, Oracle, SAP, whatever, then you can say, okay, what's on your menu? What do you offer? And okay, we now have this deep learning, this or web analytics, that, and so forth. And then you sort of trust the vendor, and you ride along with them. Now there are good. There are benefits. There are pros and cons here. One of the cons is that these are not the ones driving the innovation today.
Nope.
If you go to the technical conferences, they're completely dominated by the high tech product companies and the cloud vendors and open source, essentially. Exactly. So what else can you do? Well, you can find specific solutions to niche problem. You can, get your web analytics things from Mixpanel or Google Analytics, and then you can get your deep learning things from Peltarion, and then you can get your BI things from Snowflake or Power BI or something. And then you solve problems in a siloed manner.
And where's the factory?
Exactly. You don't get a factory, and for those problems, if you have a match, then that's usually efficient, but you don't get this bottom-up innovation that we see when we democratize the data. So there are pros and cons here, and I think none of these options are even close to matching the value that we see in companies like Spotify or Google in terms of creating value from data. Yeah. So I firmly believe that we need to find new ways to collaborate.
Is that the idea of Scling, or
Scling is the pronunciation? Yes.
Yes. Is this short for scaling, or what's the origin?
It's a reuse name. I'm very environmentally friendly. So it was actually a name for an earlier startup that never left the hobby phase, and then it was a combination between that was a natural language processing idea. So it was a combination between science, language, Ling as in language, and scaling. I like short names, and it's very hard to find a good name where the com domain is free. Right, true. So I was tired of finding names, and I got some good.
So what's the core idea now of Scling? Let's go there. So what's the core value proposition?
The core value proposition is to extract value from data on behalf of our customers by collaborating closely with them. So you remember the arrogance which we spoke about earlier between the domain experts who think how hard can data be, and the data or AI experts who think how hard can a domain be. So we want to respect both of these competencies by collaborating with the people that have the data and the domain knowledge, and work with them. And if these companies that we turn to, if they were technical enough and had the volume to build their own data departments and so forth, they would and perhaps should do that. But so we are an partnership alternative to building your own. So when companies think, hey, maybe we should hire this chief data officer and let him build a team of 5, 10, 20 people, that we are an alternative to that strategy.
So if any company wants to start or really get bootstrapped into the data journey and becoming data ready in some way, that could be an option to turn to you and Scling.
Exactly. And the way it works in practice is that we set up flows from their system, from their databases or their Google Analytics or Salesforce accounts and so forth into our own platform, which runs in a major cloud. And we build together with the with the domain experts, build these data flows and data pipelines and so forth. We run them, we operate them, we host them. So, and it's a refinery. So we get raw data in and we produce refined data.
But I think, can we segue now into the next theme a little bit?
Yeah, if it's the right theme.
No, but because here I think this one of the most interesting thing with what Scling is doing is actually, in a way, trying to understand where is the future type of alternative business model comes and going, or where are we heading when it comes to data, and even to the point where we talk about data pipelines as a service. And I find that super interesting to explore a little bit because, a lot of companies, it's not only about the complexity, it's also about, I have a CapEx constraint, I have an OpEx constraint, I have a full-time equivalent recruitment constraint. So I know a bunch of companies, they got the money, but they are not supposed to recruit anymore. So as a service, and we need to buy this as a service, is very interesting, and it's done quite elaborately in different fields. And here we now have Scling as a service, data as a pipeline. So how did you, so this is sort of, I think this is new territory, to be honest, right? Where this is going and how it could evolve. But I think it's also something about, is the consultant, is the whole industry, the way we are tackling this, is it the right way, or are there other ways? And I think Scling is now really exploring new territory, which I think is cool.
Yeah, for good and for bad. We definitely are. And the only thing that I'm convinced of is that we need to explore new territory in terms of ways of collaborating and business models. And we are small, so we explore one variant, right? And I'm sure that we will slightly pivot along the path and find new ways of interacting with the clients, depending on how technical they are and which domain they're in. And I think we will need to experiment with the business model. Today we have a value-based business model where you you pay for the value that you get out of it in terms of pipelines rather than paying for hours. But that is difficult to sell because people know how to buy hours, right? And they know how to buy software as a service, but they don't really know how to buy value in a domain or in a tech area that's new for them. So sometimes people ask me, well, don't you need to move faster and expand faster and so forth? What happens if one of the big consultancy giants adopt this model? And I think that will be great because then we can look at them, Accenture or Tieto or whatever. They're doing this. We're doing the same thing, but here are our credentials. Then we are competing with someone, and that would be perfect. Because that would help us explain the model. Because
to some degree we're exploring new service categories.
Exactly, and that turns out to be much more difficult